G'day, I'm Stuart McMillen. Now hopefully you've already watched my YouTube video, Top 10 Essential Graphic Novels, where I recommended 10 awesome comics that you really should run out and read. With that list, I focused on recommending books that I'm pretty sure everybody would like. But with this video, I'm going to recommend some comics that I really like, but may not necessarily be everyone's packet of chips. So check out the artwork, listen to the descriptions, and think about whether these books sound interesting to you. The books that I feature in this video are in no particular order, and they're quite a grab bag of different genres and different styles. So I'll just get into it, shall I? Now the first book I'd like to discuss is Burma Chronicles by Delisle. Guy is known for his travelogue comics that document him living in foreign countries for a period of time. And most people seem to recommend his book Pyongyang, which is about his time living in North Korea in 2003. And whilst I like that one, the book of his that I like the best is Burma Chronicles. Guy visited Burma in 2005 because his wife works for Doctors Without Borders, and she was posted to Burma as part of her aid work. And I think that this is one of the reasons why I like Burma Chronicles more than Pyongyang. Because in Pyongyang, Guy was visiting North Korea as a single guy, whereas in Burma Chronicles, we see how Guy also has to be a husband and a father to his baby son. The book is structured as a lot of little vignettes that show various aspects of his life as an expat visiting a developing country and seeing everything with fresh eyes. There are sections of the book that cover everything from house hunting on the Burmese real estate market, dealing with the intense tropical heat, as well as the frequent blackouts that kill the lights and the air conditioning. But as well as these domestic things, he does a good job of explaining the political reality of life under a military dictatorship. So he talks about the way that the magazines that are sold in Burma are censored. So it's actually someone's job to sit down with a pair of scissors and cut individual columns from magazine pages. He talks about the country's then opposition leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, being under house arrest and living in his neighbourhood. He talks about the snap decision that the Burmese government made to move the country's administration to a new capital city with just 24 hours notice. Now let's talk about the artwork, because I can't stress enough how jealous I am of Guy's artwork. It's so deceptively simple with a sketchy feel to it, but I find it so effective for conveying his whimsical storytelling style. And I particularly like the colours in the book, or should I say, the shading that gives a real depth to the artwork. I mean, check out this little village in the rural part of Burma, or this shady street in downtown Rangoon. It's really nice stuff seeing the contrast between the sunlight and the shadows, and it reminds me that cartoonists don't have to be so pedantic about accuracy. Sometimes the effective stuff is more effective than realistic copies. So check out Burma Chronicles and then check out the rest of Guy Delisle's work. And I've got to admit that I'm only 3 books into his back catalogue myself. Now let's talk about Sin City by Frank Miller, which was released in the early 90s and caused quite a stir in the comics world. Right off the bat, it was the artwork of Sin City that leapt out at everyone. The comics have a noir look with extreme contrast between the light and dark parts of the images. In other words, everything is either black or white, and there's extensive use of shadows and silhouettes. And Frank tries a lot of interesting effects with the look of the comic, like for example the way that Marv's bandages show up on his silhouette for some reason. I really like that. And look, as well as the artwork, the series is famous for its tone of writing, which uses the kind of language from detective pulp fiction. It's fun to read, and the images and text work really well together. And I also like Frank Miller's extensive use of onomatopoeia throughout the comic, with sound effect words like blam, blam, punt, spack, and poom poom being incorporated into the artwork. I was so close to putting Sin City into my list of essential comics, but I thought I'd err on the side of caution and put it here in my list of personal favourites. There are 7 Sin City stories that Frank Miller released, and to be honest, I don't like all of them equally. So my 3 recommendations for the best Sin City yarns are number 1, The Hard Goodbye, number 2, A Dame to Kill For, and number 4, That Yellow Bastard. So check out those 3 Sin City books, and then maybe check out the others as well. Now let's talk about Super Crash by Daryl Cunningham, which is also known as The Age of Selfishness. Many of the books that I'm discussing in these videos appeal to me because they're so different to the kind of comics that I draw. For example, Frank Miller's Sin City is so different to anything that I could produce myself, and that's why I like it. On the other hand, I really like Daryl Cunningham's comics because they're so close to what I try to achieve with my own work. In a nutshell, this book is about the global financial crisis and the libertarian philosophy that spawned it, which was highly influenced by the writings of Ayn Rand. My favourite part of this book is the first section where Daryl presents an 80-page biography of Ayn Rand's life and career. The storytelling technique is mostly chronological, fact-by-fact account of her life. But then, at the end of the section, Daryl makes it so clear that he's chosen her as the subject of his biography because her worldview is so appalling to him. And then he lets loose with a 10-page condemnation of Ayn Rand's philosophy. It's a powerful section. We see Daryl's point-by-point condemnation of her hypocrisy and the inconvenient facts about her lifestyle that she chose not to declare or acknowledge. Throughout this section, the strongly worded sentences are juxtaposed with orange and red illustrations of New York's buildings. I remember the first time I read this section, it really gripped me and I thought it was such a strong conclusion, especially when you compare it to the deliberately dry and restrained storytelling that he'd used up until that point. So what I'm saying is that if you like my comics, if you like my worldview, check out Daryl Cunningham's comics. The book that I'm talking about is called either Super Crash or The Age of Selfishness, depending on which country you live in. It was released with different titles in different countries. But besides this book, get your hand on anything else that you can by British cartoonist Daryl Cunningham. Okay, now let's talk about Black Hole by Charles Burns. This is a book that was set in the suburbs of Seattle in the 1970s and features a bunch of teenagers who, one by one, contract a sexually transmitted disease. Now, in the world of Black Hole, the people who catch this disease become mutated. They get some sort of mutant deformity, such as growing a tail or getting strange lumps on their head, or in one kid's case, growing a small mouth on the back of his neck. Generally, the kids who catch the disease, or the bug as it's called, turn into social outcasts, and many of them actually live in a forest encampment on the edges of town. So the story of Black Hole deals with normal teenage stuff, changing bodies, changing skins, social alienations, except Charles Burns has really amped it up with the mutations that these particular teenagers are going through. Now, I know everyone else says this, but I've got to say it too. Charles Burns' artwork is fantastic. He's got such a distinctive style. I mean, if you're ever flipping through a magazine and you see an image that looks like this, or this, or this, or this, it's got to be Charles Burns. He's got such distinctive brushwork, such distinctive use of black as a solid element within his designs. There are no shades of grey here. It's either black or white. And I love how meticulous he is with the way he feathers the edge of the black sections or draws faint little shadings on people's faces. It's almost hard to imagine that this was drawn by someone at all. It just seems to exist without having been created by any mere mortal. And I particularly like the scenes that are set in the forest at night time. There's something about the way that Charles draws the white outline of the trees and the white blades of grass that really appeals to me against the blackness of the background. So the artwork is a feast for the eyes, the story is unique, and I really recommend that you check out Black Hole by Charles Burns. Alright, now let's talk about a landmark work of comics. It's American Splendor by Harvey Pekar. American Splendor was a series of autobiographical comics that were published by Harvey Pekar from 1976 through until 2008, which was slightly before his death. The comics were mostly autobiographical stories about Harvey's everyday life, which was quite a revelation in the time when he started publishing these comics in the 70s. It was Harvey who had the foresight to see that comics didn't have to be about superheroes or dragons or outer space. He saw that comics could equally be about needing to take your car to the mechanic, or being called up for jury duty, or his experiences working his day job as a filing clerk in a Cleveland hospital. Throughout the run of comics, you get the sense that Harvey is a bachelor living a slim existence. Even when he gets invited to be a regular guest on the David Letterman show, the actual sales of his comic were fairly low, so balancing his budget and money issues continues to be a recurring theme of American Splendor, as is his relationship with his wife and his efforts to be a good dad to their adopted daughter. Harvey was the writer of all of these comics, but he didn't draw the artwork for any of the comics. So all of the different stories are drawn by a variety of artists, including the legendary R. Crumb. Actually, it's really interesting to see the way that all of the different artists drew Harvey in their own style. It's really interesting to see the juxtaposition between those who draw him with a realistic style compared to those who seem to delight in drawing Harvey in a grotesque style. Now look, on one hand, Harvey Pekar was just an average working class guy, but on the other hand, he was a real visionary who essentially invented a whole new genre of comics. And as I shoot this video, it's been about 7 years since Harvey's death, and there hasn't been a great effort to grab the American Splendor back catalogue and reprint it in a comprehensive way. So until now, until someone gets around to releasing a new anthology, probably your best bet is American Splendor, The Life and Times of Harvey Pekar, which is a reprint of his first 2 anthologies and includes comics from the late 70s and early 80s. But honestly, someone should get this stuff back into print, including his book, Our Cancer Year, which was written by Harvey and his wife about the year that Harvey had prostate cancer. So check out the American Splendor comics and also check out the film American Splendor starring Paul Giamatti as Harvey Pekar, which is really well done. Alright, now let's talk about a wordless comic, Flood by Eric Drucker. Flood is simply a fantastical story that is told only through images. It's about an artist who lives in New York City and a series of events that happen during a massive rainstorm. As you can see, Eric makes great use of blacks with his artwork, and he seems to be fascinated by the way that human beings live and behave within the urban environment of the city. And he seems to be fascinated with the wind and the rain that eventually inundate the city throughout the storm. It's pretty thoughtful stuff, good for letting your mind fill in the gaps without there being words to guide your understanding of the story. And by the way, if you're a fan of Faith No More, you probably already recognize some of the imagery in this book. So check out Flood by Eric Drucker. Now look, while we're on the topic of wordless comics, let's discuss The Arrival by Sean Tan. The Arrival is about a man who leaves his home to move to a foreign land and to find work to support his family. The whole book is told through pictures, and Sean Tan illustrates the book in a strikingly realistic style. He deliberately draws the architecture of the new country as well as the citizens of the new country in a fantastical alien style. And I think that this is a deliberate choice to put the reader into the shoes of someone like the main character who finds himself in an unfamiliar and disorientating environment. The illustrations are printed in a yellow sepia tone, which makes the story feel like it happened a long time ago in the past. It's an effect that reminds me of the picture book Dinotopia by James Gurney, because Sean Tan shows humans and non-humans living and working together in the same sort of way that James Gurney shows humans and dinosaurs living together in Dinotopia. So check out The Arrival by Sean Tan if you want to ponder the universal experience of human migration, and if you want to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's just arrived in an unfamiliar culture. Now the next comic I'd like to recommend is DayTripper, which is by the Brazilian twin brothers Fabio Moon and Gabriel Barr. DayTripper is a comic about a young man who writes the obituary columns for his city's newspaper. But beyond that, he wants to follow his father's footsteps and become a great writer in his own right. Mortality is the theme running through this slightly surreal 250-page comic. In each chapter of the comic, we join the main character for a day in his life. The chronology keeps on jumping around throughout each of the 10 chapters of the book. In the first chapter, he's age 32, then in the next chapter, he's age 21. We also see him as a 47-year-old, as an 11-year-old, and finally as a 76-year-old man. So in other words, we're following this guy for 10 days of his life, but the 10 days are scattered all throughout his life. As you can see, the artwork is incredibly imaginative. I especially like the illustrations of the character swimming underwater beneath a harbour full of anchored boats. It sort of looks like they're blimps floating above him, tethered to the ground by anchors. The scenery keeps on changing throughout the comic as we move throughout time and move to various locations around Brazil. So we see everything from the city to the beach, to the desert, to the countryside. Anyway, it's really nice stuff, and it comes with a one-page illustrated introduction by Craig Thompson. Bargain, right? So check out DayTripper by Fabio Moon and Gabriel Barr. Now let's talk about When the Wind Blows by British cartoonist Raymond Briggs. When the Wind Blows was created during the early 1980s in the middle of the Cold War. During the 80s there was a real threat of nuclear war ending civilization at any moment's notice. So Raymond Briggs decided to write a black comedy about the absurdity of the situation. He saw that even though war is conducted by presidents and generals and men of immense ego, it's the everyday people who have to suffer as a result of their decisions. So he focuses on an elderly British couple and shows what their experience is like on the day that nuclear war breaks out between the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union. This is black comedy at its purest. The main characters are simple people who never seem to comprehend the severity of the situation, no matter how bad things progressively get. And there's plenty of jokes about them misunderstanding the official government instructions, as well as absent-mindedly misunderstanding each other. When the Wind Blows was quite a landmark book when it was released in the 1980s, both in terms of the service it did to comics as an early British graphic novel, but apparently it was also influential with a number of British politicians, helping them to see the absurdity of nuclear war. So check out When the Wind Blows by Raymond Briggs. Now, of all the comics I'm going to cover in this list, the next book is probably intended for the youngest audience. The book is Smile by Raina Telgemeier and is an autobiographical story about when she was in the 6th grade and needed extensive orthodontic work to recover from an accident where she fell and lost her 2 front teeth. The comic is all about being right on the cusp of high school and the awkwardness associated with orthodontics and being a teenager in general. As I mentioned, the primary audience of this book is probably teenagers, but I really like it. The artwork is excellent and the storytelling is top-notch. And if you like Smile, check out the sequel, Sisters, which focuses on the adversarial relationship that Raina had with her sister during school. Okay, now let's talk about Something New by Lucy Knisley. Lucy Knisley is one of the best comics artists that I've discovered in recent times. I'm really impressed by the sheer quantity of work that she's created in such a short time. She began her career with travelogue books that weren't really my cup of tea, but she's noticeably improved with age, and her most recent book, therefore, is her best book to date. Something New is a memoir about an unexpected series of events where Lucy's ex-boyfriend came to town, proposed to her, and then she agreed to marry him. So the book chronicles the whole story of their relationship, right from the very first time they met, right up until their wedding day. Lucy does a great job of chronicling the experience of planning a wedding, and this includes reconciling her feminist side with the realities of the marriage industry, which is known for preying on the insecurities of brides-to-be, as well as all the little things like her bachelorette party and planning the big day itself. Now, this is the kind of thing that wouldn't have worked if the author had done a half-assed job, but thankfully Lucy goes overboard with details. It's a really extensive chronicle of everything she did, thought and felt surrounding her wedding. So I'd recommend this book for anyone that you know who's engaged to be married, or maybe a couple who's recently become married. But otherwise it's a great read for anyone who likes slice of life, autobiographical stories. The book is 275 pages long, and I take my hat off to her for the sheer amount of detail that she was able to capture. And I like the contrast between her illustrations and the photographs that show what the real wedding was actually like. Lucy Knisley continues to improve with age, and she's just given birth to her first child, so look out for her next book, which I'm sure will all be about pregnancy and motherhood. Alright, that's it for now. I'll shoot another one of these videos when I've got more comics I'd like to discuss. But if this list was helpful and you'd like to buy any of these books, check out my book depository affiliate links below. If you make any book purchases through the book depository after clicking on the links, I'll get a small kickback. But I'm curious as to how you like the books on this list and the books on my top 10 comics list. Let me know which comics you think I'm missing. Get involved in the comments below. As you can see, I like a fair sweep of genres. Everything from books about wedding planning through to books about dames and guns and crooks. So let me know any quality titles that you think I'd like. And you know what, here's a crazy idea. If there's a book you think I really should read, I've got my postal address listed on my website, so you could always order the book and get it mailed to me. Or like, it was worth a try, wasn't it? Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.